Alright, so welcome to the first episode of the presentation. This is meant to be held once or twice a week here on the Men Among the Ruins server, and it is a presentation held by whomever on the server feels like holding one. And scheduling is supposed to happen 1 or 2 weeks ahead of time, but right now it has happened ad hoc because it is the first time ever. Now, the person who holds the presentation can pick any subject of an intellectually related topic and present it for an audience in the server, as you will see here in just a moment. And the format is as follows. There is a limit of 30 minutes for presentation, so not that long, but also not that short. Then you have 10 minutes or less, if it doesn't take very long, for questions and answers towards the speaker. After that, you will have 20 minutes of free discussion where anybody is allowed to reply more thoroughly to the speaker, and you can have a bit more of a free discussion on the subject. The entire thing will be heavily moderated in order to keep the speaker in the center of attention. Now, with that being said, we can move on to the topic of tonight. Our speaker is Australia Calling, and actually before we start, you can also know that everybody who is listening in right now, you can talk in the presentation's voice, the text channel, if you want to make comments live, and that will also be part of the recording. However, Australia Calling, you shouldn't be taking questions while you're presenting, so you don't have to look in the presentation's chat channel. But yeah, with that, so the topic of tonight will be Sodomites and the alt-right. Is that correct, Australia Calling?
Yes.
Alright, feel free to continue as you wish.
Okay. Welcome to this presentation on a pressing issue that needs to be addressed. The so-called alt-right movement has grown quite a bit since the 2016 US presidential campaign. With so many new members and with such a broad definition of the alt-right, many people have found them in an awkward situation. Many members disagree with the what is morally right and what should be accepted. Libertarians, reactionaries, fascists, nationalists, and many other people with different political ideologies encompass this alt-right. One of the biggest arguments people have in the alt-right is the act of sodomy. Many people believe that degenerate marriage should not be legalized, but it's okay for faggots to perform the act of sodomy. In this presentation, I will be discussing these individuals and why it is a danger to this so-called European nationalist movement. The three individuals we will be discussing tonight are Greg Johnson, Millennial Woes, and TRS. Greg Johnson runs the website Countercurrents, which publishes far-right articles. He is a self-described homosexual and has no issue with discussing his homosexual tendencies. He has published articles such as The Old Right versus the New Right, which is basically describing what he believes is the so-called new liberal right. The next individual is Millennial Woes. Millennial Woes has been running a YouTube channel for about 3 years and has gained quite a bit of popularity. Over this time, he has almost gained 30,000 subscribers and has gotten so big that he was doxxed and had to leave his own country. Millennial Woes is also a self-described homosexual. He has committed acts of sodomy in the past. Although he says that he is not a homosexual anymore, he still defends homosexuality and describes people that attack homosexuals in this movement, people who are just jealous of their popularity. The next person we'll be discussing is someone who had been contributing to TRS. This person is called Risen Ghoul. He was a contributor and podcaster for TRS. He didn't explain that he was a homosexual from the start. He was doxxed and information about him had come out afterwards. We'll be discussing and explaining that a bit more later on. Greg Johnson is definitely one of the most dangerous homosexuals within this movement. His comments recently on white nationalism and his so-called utopian so-called utopian white future is definitely one that we need to discuss. His comments on Facebook has followed. I oppose a package deal of white nationalism and social conservatism. White nationalism is for all white people. My idea of a utopia is a place where we are still fighting over abortion and feminism, but it is only white people who are doing it. I think these reactionaries are ball and chain on white nationalism. They have never won a battle since when? Stalingrad? He has also said, I think this movement should disavow people who use the word Sodomites. You sound like a fucking snake handler. So obviously these comments made by Greg Johnson are completely absurd to anyone who considers themselves far right. A popular podcaster, Common Filth, has also put out a statement saying, talking about Greg Johnson, saying white nationalism is code for it's okay if white people do it. I completely agree with this. If we are going to have a utopia white future, we should not be arguing over abortion and feminism. We have already had this in America in the 20s and 30s and 40s. It didn't work, and I don't know why Greg Johnson thinks that still fighting over these topics is going to help anyone. Abortion is a complete immoral act. It is the killing of a child. Of course, we can discuss whether or not it is fine to let abortions for non-whites, but for whites, it's completely out of the question. This is just a completely immoral act, and I have no idea why Greg Johnson would agree with why we should be debating over abortion. And feminism, Greg Johnson has openly disavowed Sinead McCarty, who publishes for Renegade Broadcasting, and attacked her for her views on feminism and why she believes that feminism should be in the future, why we should still have feminism in the future. I don't know why people like Greg Johnson attack someone like this, but then also think that it's still fine for us to debate over feminism. It's a completely stupid and hypocritical stance to take. He then also calls people that uses the word Sodomites as a snake handler. This is probably because Greg Johnson is probably sick and tired of being called a Sodomite, even though he actually is. He probably knows what he is doing is immoral and is constantly reminded that he is a Sodomite. This is probably getting on Greg Johnson's nerve and is definitely and this is why we cannot have homosexuals in this movement, because they put their needs in front of the people that need in front of the actual values of this movement. Greg Johnson should not care what people call him. He is trying to take the moral high ground here, where he has absolutely no place to stand on it, because he has already committed these atrocities. Now, the next individual we're talking about has defended Greg Johnson multiple occasions. This, of course, is Millennial Woes. Millennial Woes has been open about his homosexual acts. In a video in late 2015, he published a 2-hour video titled Reply to Poll. This is where he commented on many different stances people took on Millennial Woes. When people called him a homosexual, a degenerate homosexual, Millennial Woes would come back with I'm only bi, not gay. This, to me, doesn't make a difference. If you can perform a homosexual act, that makes you a homosexual. Whether you're attracted to both females and males, you are still a homosexual. You cannot defend yourself and say, "Oh, I'm bi. I actually like women as well," as an argument. That is not a proper argument to use. He has also come out and defended homosexuals. He has defended homosexuals in TRS, Greg Johnson and Countercurrents, and also many other far-right contributors and websites. In his Skype, in his personal Skype, the Millennial Woes group chat, we have been explaining about Greg Johnson, since Greg Johnson is having a talk in a conference in a couple of weeks. We were discussing about Greg Johnson and why some of us believe that Greg Johnson should not be in this movement. For me, myself, I called Greg Johnson a pathetic loser who has no place in this movement. I called him a degenerate, and afterwards I was kicked from his server and from his Skype and blocked. His statements afterwards, this was Millennial Woes, his statements afterwards was, I don't demand that anyone in this community holds any particular opinion of Greg Johnson or any other friends. But AustraliaCalls' comments about Greg were unacceptable. The gay question is getting too much airtime in the alt-right recently. I believe it is an obsession of inadequates who are angry that a faggot like Greg Johnson or Ryan Flock have achieved more for this movement than they have. I do not advocate or promote homosexuality, but I do believe they should be left alone and treated respectfully like everyone else. If you are unhappy with this attitude, you should leave the Millennial Woes community. This is completely unacceptable for anyone to be claiming they are far right to say this. Someone who says they should be left alone and treated respectfully like anyone else, that is an egalitarian standpoint, and that is someone taking the mindset of a liberal who says, oh, well, they're refugees, they're human, they must be let in. Also, he also claimed that the gay question was getting too much airtime in the alt-right. That is like civil nationalists like Paul Joseph Watson claiming the Jewish question is getting too much airtime and that there's no such thing as a Jewish question and it's just a grand conspiracy. And anyone that actually does that is just jealous of Jews because Jews are in positions of power. This is completely dangerous for someone with such a large influence and people who look up to him. As myself, I am young as well. I looked up to Millennial Woes when I was getting red-pilled. I saw him as a leader and someone who I could trust and look up to. But I don't know why anyone would look up to a degenerate faggot like this. I've realized my mistakes, but I believe many others haven't. Many young people are being confused by this recent outburst of homosexuality in this movement. People are looking up to these leaders like Greg Johnson and Millennial Woes and saying, well, if they're homosexuals, it doesn't matter. I think I'll be one as well, or I will defend homosexuals. It is also preposterous to say that people who don't like homosexuals or are arguing against the act of sodomy are just people who are jealous of these leaders and these popular podcasters. I could not care less if you had 1 subscriber or had 10,000. If you're promoting this degenerate act towards people and getting people to believe that in my book is disgusting. It is not how much popularity they have, although that does contribute to it since they have such a wide reach, but it's just the act itself and the claim that you are far right. The next person we'll be talking about is someone who contributed to TRS. This person is called Ghoul or Risen Ghoul. There is many evidence to show that Ghoul groomed a 15-year-old at a concert and then invited him over to a hotel and had sex with him. Of course, these could not be confirmed, but there is many screenshots from Poll to show this is true. Ghoul was also raised with 2 lesbian wives. This shows that Ghoul has had been subjected to this degenerate act and disgusting behavior in the past and from a very young age. There is also screenshots of Ghoul sending dick pics to people and acting completely disgusting and degenerate to others. The reason why this is so bad and why many people on the far right and in this so-called movement get up in arms about it is because they are pushing their own homosexual agenda. They put their degenerate behavior before others, and it will kill this movement. We are already seeing the breakdown of it since many people are arguing, and me myself have found out this by being kicked by Millennial Woes from his Skype. Many people are being subjected to being exiled from this community by these so-called leaders such as Greg Johnson and Millennial Woes and the TRS server, which I was also kicked out for calling Ghoul homosexual. It is the same thing what happened to the NRX crowd when Jews infiltrated it and started pushing their own agenda like Molebug. They have their... Being a homosexual to many is something they pride themselves as. Homosexuals generally don't change their behavior because it's something they feel that they are part of, that is them. It feels like they are getting rid of a part of themselves when they no longer can perform these acts. This is the same with Jews. So they put themselves before the movement and put their acts before the movement because they don't want to lose a part of themselves. If homosexuals want to be homosexuals, I'm fine with that, as long as they stay in the closet and stay in the closet and do not mention it to anyone. It is a complete disgusting act, though, and it should not be prided and defended by these so-called leaders. Thank you.
All right, there you go. I had some problems unmuting my microphone, so well done. Can everybody unmute themselves and we'll have a round of applause? Come on, join in. It's only two of us.
Yeah, well done, man.
Yep, that's good. All right, so I've got a couple of questions written down here, but I don't want to be the one to start, so anybody else can just grab the mic and ask a question. Am I the only one who's got questions?
Well, perhaps you should go first, and it might spur a question in others' minds.
Alright, so I'll start then. It is quite clear that you consider sodomy to be a vile thing, but what do you propose in terms of policy against those who would commit the act of sodomy in a future state or society? What is the punishment or so?
I don't know yet. I know for transsexuals or whatever they call themselves, it is definitely exile or an execution. But for sodomies, I don't know yet. I do believe, though, once you have outed yourself or have been outed as a homosexual, there should be some type of punishment. So they either keep it in the closet and don't explain it to anyone, or if they get outed, there should be some type of punishment. Whether that is an execution or jail time, I'm not sure yet.
Yep. All right. Yep.
I have a question in a similar vein. How do you propose we solve the problem of homosexual infiltration and subversion in the so-called alt-right movement, if it is to be salvaged at all?
Well, basically, people like Greg Johnson and Millennial Woes need to be completely... They shouldn't be taken serious and people shouldn't watch them or view their blog. So once someone is outed as a homosexual, they should just be completely not taken serious and not defended at all.
Do you think that it's worse for people to be open about it or for people to keep it in secret while still doing activities such as like what Ghoul did?
I think they're both bad. But there's no way that we can completely stop it in the fact that we're not going to have a police force going around looking inside people's windows to check if they're performing these acts. Like it's not going to happen for us to be going around and looking for people that are actually gay. So I think that once you are outed, there should be a punishment. But I think they are both definitely disgusting. Whether you do it when you're outed as a homosexual, or if you're doing it in the closet.
Alright, I also have another question, and this is partly as a devil's advocate thing and for the benefit of unaware listeners. The question is, why do you stand against sodomy as an act? Health problems, societal problems, or spiritual problems? What is the main thing that's bad about it?
Well, it just shows a lack of willpower. It's a completely degenerate act. It doesn't produce children. It's done for personal gain. It's the same thing as masturbation. People do it for personal gain. Yeah.
Alright, yeah. I can read his question aloud here from Liberdad. Do you have any methods you might use to convince people in the alt-right community not to listen to these homosexual leaders?
Well, the best we can do is just show arguments why these homosexuals are taking over the movement and why they're derailing the conversation into their own agenda. So I don't think we can forcefully stop people, since, as myself, I found it hard to believe that I shouldn't be listening to Millennial Woes anymore since he had red-pilled me on race. So I was a bit upset when I found out about this. But I think people need to realize that it's for the benefit of European civilization if we exile these homosexuals, because they're derailing this movement and putting it into pushing their own agenda.
Alright, so are questions running dry? Here's Jebcraft might have something to say. Either way, though, I gotta say, Australia Calling, it's been really cool that you've been able to have the presentation this quickly. You got noticed from it yesterday, right? You said you had like
Yeah.
a little bit more than 24 hours.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Well done.
Alright, so
I
here's
was
a question.
impressed,
Actually,
especially considering the short notice.
We'll take Jebcraft's question first. So from HP Jebcraft, which execution method is better for the execution of homosexuals? Burning, drowning, or drowning them in bogs?
Either one's fine with me.
Well, pick one.
Just like flip a coin.
Ah,
Yeah. Just flip a coin, whichever one.
all right, fair enough. Angriff had something to say.
I was just curious, like, because this is something I've been discussing with some people lately, is just, what do you think the ultimate cause is? Is it to do with, like, messed up hormone levels, weak willpower alone, just, like, the fact that it's contagious like a disease, or is it just some combination of these?
Yeah, it might be something messed up in their brain. It might be a lack of willpower, and it could also be the fact that they might been raised by homosexual parents, so they've grown to think that it's fine. So I think for most homosexuals, it's a combination of different things, and it's different for a lot of them. So they'll have their own reasons why they're homosexual. For Millennial Woe's case, it was because he was grown up in a liberal household and that he went to college and was very left-leaning.
I actually never heard his story of that. I watched him for a brief time, but I never got that deeply into watching him. So
Yeah,
I'm not actually familiar with his exact story.
I've been watching him for probably 2 years now, or a year and a half, and that's why I was
I actually sometimes think that the people
realized
that
that I could.
act normal and masculine but say that there's no problem with homosexuality are almost worse than homosexuals themselves. Like Golden One, for example, acts all butthurt whenever anyone countersignals homosexuality. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, because the when you defend it, it allows people to continue doing it. So even if you say nothing about it, that's better than actively going out of your way to defend it. So I don't know if defending it's worse, but definitely both of them should be heavily frowned upon. And anyone doing it, both of them or either one shouldn't be have any room or time for anyone on this movement.
Why do you think it's okay to accept closeted people into the movement?
No, I don't think that we should be accepting closeted people into the movement, but we're not. If we got to be realistic and realize that we're not going to have a police force going around knocking on people's windows, seeing if they are performing these acts. So so if you are going to be a homosexual, you need to be closeted. But once you're found out, if anyone catches you or reports on you, you should be immediately disavowed, and something like a punishment should be in place for that.
All right, Svartkutta has a question here that I can read aloud. Do you think being molested as a child can influence one's chance of being a homosexual?
Yeah, probably. I don't know. I haven't looked into the psychology of it yet, but that definitely may be a reason why. I know Milo Yiannopoulos claimed that that's one of the reasons why, because he was molested as a child, and that he doesn't see any problem with pedophilia. But yeah, that may be a reason why, that people being molested as a child become a homosexual.
Do you think there's any basis behind the idea of conversion therapy? You know, like with all the Mike Pence memes of electrocuting the gays to make them straight. You think there's anything like that that could actually work?
I don't know if it will work, because such as Millennial Woes, who claims that he's no longer homosexual, but still actively defends them and still virtue signals for them. I don't think that one can change, really. Possibly conversion may work, but I don't know if it will.
I mean, I know what Himmler said in his speech about the subject was that he thought if you caught it early enough that they were just like thinking about it, that you could probably reverse it. But after they've actually gotten into the lifestyle, there's no saving them.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, similarly, to what degree do you believe in, second chances? To what degree do you think that a man can just choose to end that sort of lifestyle and become a trustworthy regular man again?
Sorry, what was the question? Could you ask it again?
Oh, to what degree do you believe in second chances, basically? Do you think that a man can totally disavow his previous lifestyle and become a regular, trustworthy person again? Because I know that, for example, George Lincoln Rockwell allowed many former homosexuals into his movement, but had absolutely no tolerance for active ones.
Uh-huh. Did somebody DC?
Not sure.
Or either that or he had a meltdown. Australia calling. This is Europe calling. Oh well.
You can edit this out, right?
I can, but I probably won't. It's not that important. He'll be back in a moment, and we can meanwhile move over to the more free discussion type of the.
I think that ultimately the second chances is the most interesting area for discussion personally.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what to think there. I tend to lean towards no, but I'm not set on that.
Mm. So, when I asked AustraliaCalls here about why he was against sodomy, I agree very much with this answer that it is mostly a sign of degeneracy on a personal level. It is one of the signs that you are a degenerate person who values a hedonistic lifestyle over actual values. For example, you live for pleasure and you value pleasure over things like fertility and, well, health and society. So
Well,
it is mostly a
virtue.
kind of a spiritual problem. Like, say, technically, what if you could have a homosexual who didn't have a bunch of health problems and it also didn't fuck society up? It would still not be okay because it is a purely degenerate act in and of itself.
Yes, I have a problem with it on the metaphysical level, because I think it was, what's his name? The head of the Mysterium Fasces Christian podcast.
Florian Geyer.
Yes, Florian Geyer, I think, put it well. Although I'm not a Christian, I definitely agree from a pagan perspective that metaphysically, what a man is doing when he commits sodomy is taking like his most sacred, life-giving organ to continue, the link of ancestry, and just saying that all it's worth is another man's asshole, just sticking it into the end of another man's digestive system, saying that this most sacred organ is literally just worth shit. So I think, yes, independent of any other effects it may have in and of itself, it's disgusting.
To answer Liberdad a little bit here, is sex for pleasure permissible? And yes, if it is with your partner. If it's just for sleeping around with people, then it's not okay. But if it's with your partner, you can do it. It's more of a bonding exercise at that point anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
The pleasure is secondary, not primary. But college girls sleeping around with 100 guys is not okay, even though it's straight.
In my mind, it should be, if you're going to have sex with someone, it should be with someone that you realistically see yourself possibly marrying if you're not literally married.
And AustraliaCalls, you're back. I believe you DC'd for a bit there.
Yeah, I just disconnected.
Yeah, it's not a problem. We've moved on to the free discussion part of the, well, podcast.
Okay, yeah.
It's a pretty weird fetish there, Aldrich.
It is weird, not liking younger women.
Patrician as fuck.
But see here, Angriff, he mentioned a interesting topic, and we kind of floated away from it before we were able to explore it. That was, well, second chances, more in detail. How does everybody feel about it, other than just AustraliaCalls? Do you agree with George Lincoln Rockwell and his idea that, well, if you disavow your previous lifestyle, you're accepted into the movement?
Well, in the abstract, yeah. Like if a homosexual did cease, if he ceased his degenerate behavior, but I would be pretty suspicious of any homo saying that he no longer did the deed, because most of them don't.
Well, yeah, I mean, in theory, it's great, but like, how do you prove that someone is reformed?
Yeah.
What I think is I feel like a lot of people that are actually gay right now are just people that are going along with it because they see people around them doing it, so they're just following the crowd and they don't really know what they're doing. So I
think there's also a significant aspect of people that are just like so antisocial and antisocialized that they don't know how to talk to women, so they just find it, they're just like, you know, weak willpower and find like, well, it's easier to get my dick wet in a man's asshole.
There's also that. There definitely are a lot of gays. Like Greg Johnson is a perfect example because he said he was celibate, but he definitely isn't. Like he's been seen in Europe walking around with like fucking 20-year-old men and stuff like that. Like he says he's celibate. There's no way he fucking is. Like a lot of them can be cured, but a lot of them are just way far too gone to actually be fixed.
Well, how old is he? He's quite like he's older than most.
I think he's in his 50s.
Yeah, he is.
So once you've been doing acts for that long, I think it's way too far gone.
I mean, is there really a comparable thing that we can draw a parallel to of lifestyle choices which have degenerated a person?
Yeah, watching
some kind
anime.
of addiction, anime, alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
Drug use. I know a couple of people that there's some people like drug use and fucking gay shit often goes hand in hand a lot of the time. I think a drug user probably has a better chance of being reformed than a gay person, though.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, the drug problems tend to be more material, that they literally just crave it from a, physical perspective. Not a philosophical outlook on life to take heroin, I'd say. Material need from the body once you've started taking it.
Well, I know a couple of people where they have an addiction beyond, like, they just like the feeling that it gives them. So even after their body, it's like they're detoxified and their body doesn't need it anymore. They still have a craving for it.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could put like marijuana as in that category. There's no like physical dependency, but people still get like an addiction on. It has to be a spiritual and willpower level because there isn't a physical addiction.
All right, well, does anybody have something to wrap up around the topic on Sodomites and the alt-right? I think it was good in general.
I actually have one more topic I wanted to bring up on it that
Yep.
I think is important, is that for whatever reason, it seems, I mean, and he sort of touched on this very indirectly, that they infiltrate things the same way as other, outsider groups like Jews or various other ones, but particularly similarly to Jews. They infiltrate, they shill for their own interests, bring in others of their type and promote them to, if they have any influence, they promote their fellow Sodomites to positions of influence. I've wondered for a while why it is if they're that similar. And the only answer I've come across is that just like the Jew, the homosexual, basically on a fundamental level, is antagonistic with nature and with everything natural.
Yeah, the spiritual is Semitic to some extent. That's an interesting, it's an interesting viewpoint. I tend to agree.
Yes, they're the lie physically embodied, because their lifestyle is totally contrary to the principles to which they owe their own existence, which is why it's such a self-destructive activity. It's why they're punished by nature.
Oh, here's an interesting question. And I'll give it to whoever feels like picking up the microphone first. If somebody is listening to this and they're having homosexual tendencies, what are they supposed to do?
I'd say you gotta really just think about what you're doing, because at least in my experience, whenever I'm doing something that I know is not very virtuous, I just think long and hard about it, and then I just can't bring myself to do it anymore.
I would say it's a very simple thing, actually. Just look at pictures of your ancestors, your closest ancestors, of your grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents, and think, what would they think of you if they saw you thinking these things and doing these things? It's a very humbling experience in my experience generally. It's very humbling and motivating to be virtuous, to just look back on one's ancestors.
And I think in a lot of ways, it's, again, to compare it to, alcohol or drugs or anything like that, any other thing where it's a matter of willpower to abstain, I suspect that it's like drug, like it is for getting over a drug addiction. If you don't give in to the impulse, eventually it will just weaken, presumably.
Yeah, and I also have advice to give, and that is that you need to stop identifying with a label such as gay or bi. First and foremost, you're a human being who has discovered the far right or the third position, and you're listening to things like this. That is your prime identity. Then there happens to be some psychological or biological quirk in you that hampers your, existence sexually in this world. But your prime identity is not being gay or bi. Those are extremely tertiary or secondary identities that belong to you. So you should stop, and it's important, radically important on a psychological level, to actually not talk of yourself as a gay person just because you have thoughts like that. Because by talking about yourself like that, you actually become it.
Right. Conceptualize it primarily as a disability that you must overcome to be who you really are.
All right. So, any more final thoughts or questions? Otherwise, this feels like a pretty good time to end it.
Only thing I can say is, if like for Greg Johnson and people like that, don't go to any event he's attending. Don't look at his blog. Don't go to anything associated with them. He should be anathema. Just don't pay attention to him.
Right. If you take anything away from this, take away the idea that we should be actively boycotting these people and not supporting their presence.
Alright, so I'll go through the outro sequence here. So this has been the first episode of Men Among the Ruins, broadcasted on 2017-06-25. And the topic was Sodomites and the alt-right, and it was presented by AustraliaCalls, who just now actually left the voice communications, so I can't thank him personally, but I will thank him spiritually anyway. We hope it has been informative for everybody who's listened, and, we hope that there will be more informative presentations in the future. Thank you all, and see you later.